everyone, and welcome to We Go Back. I'm your host, Bryan Abou Chacra, and on this week's episode, we will be reviewing Left Behind and One of Us, the 15th and 16th episodes from Season 3 of Lost. We open up to Kate, who is locked in this rec room, and she suddenly gets hoodwinked by Juliet, who is just trying to bring her a sandwich. And I really want to point out here how much Kate cannot learn from her past mistakes. She just takes action without thinking about the consequences. Very common theme for her. We'll see it in this episode. This takes us into our flashback where we see that Kate is on the run in Iowa under the fake name Lucy. She pulls into a car stop on the side of the road and ends up running into Cassidy, who was Sawyer's big love past seasons ago. So really interesting to see that their paths had crossed before Kate had ever even made it to the island. But Kate does help her out of a sticky situation where she's trying to fleece these necklaces, running the same con that she had with Sawyer, but Kate realizes what's going on, so they help each other out mutually. Of course, Cassidy can realize that the actual reason Kate didn't want the cops to come is because she had something to hide. They go off and commiserate, and we'll catch up with them in a second because we now go to Kate in the rec room, who is shown with a game of backgammon showing the black and white. And who happens to come in right after that? None other but John Locke, who has been seen with these themes throughout the entire series. As recently as the last episode, he comes in and he tells her that he is going to go with the others and that he made a strong case for her to come along, but because of what she did to her father, they ultimately said no, and he parts ways with her. This takes us onto the beach where we see Hurley coming to Sawyer and warning him that he'll be banished if he doesn't change his behavior. That people in this episode, man, they are being really, really selective about who they let in their group. Really interesting that it's happening on both sides of the island. Love that there's this mirroring for the characters. We now return to the beach where Hurley comes to Sawyer with a warning that he will be banished if he doesn't change his behaviors and tells him that they're going to vote him off the island. Maybe this is a little jab at Survivor because at the time that show was running and it was pretty big. Both shows were definitely being compared to each other. So perhaps that was their little fun at that show. But he says he needs to change his behavior and make amends. Both sides of the island got people being really selective about who they let in their groups. This takes us to our flashback, where Kate convinces Cassidy to help her meet her mother, because Cassidy feels that one of them should get something from the person that they've been wronged. So she is willing to help her out and have one of them be able to at least say they walked away with something positive. Now let's return to the beach, where Sawyer is seen trying to fend for himself, gathering food and fishing on his own, gutting his own fish, and it doesn't seem to work out very well for him, so he returns to Hurley, and he says how can he fix it? And Hurley is the only one that Sawyer has ever apologized to, I believe. I could be wrong on this. Email me, wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure he's probably apologized jokingly or sarcastically to somebody else, but I'm pretty sure that he's only apologized to Hurley and only gone really for help to Hurley. Could be wrong. Let me know if I am. Love when you guys call me out. We now return to the jungle where Kate and Juliet get into a little tuffle because she found a knife. And I want to point out that the knife she finds in Juliet's pocket, she's holding in her hand with the point down, as if she's going to stab Juliet to kill her, but she doesn't. And this is a shot I hadn't noticed in previous watches of the show. I didn't really see her holding the knife, and I didn't consider that she would think that. But this time around, definitely read it that way, but she doesn't do it because I don't think Kate is a bad person. What she did to her father, I think she truly believed was the best thing she could do, because I think Kate constantly doesn't necessarily think about the consequences. And maybe she was thinking about them here. If you kill this woman who's handcuffed to you, how are you going to get her through the jungle? This takes us to Kate being very confrontational about the situation that she's in with Juliet. Again, showing that she's still very petulant, like a child who's never been shown the consequences for their decisions. I'll keep saying it. I don't know. I just really don't see anything else about Kate's character flaws other than she just doesn't see the consequences for her decisions. Because what does she always do? Run away. So this takes us to our flashback where Cassidy is in disguise and goes to scope out her mother's trailer, which is heavily heavily staked out by the FBI. So we know, just in case we hadn't paid attention to the beginning of the episode, that this is within the last few months, I think, that she did this to her father. And that means that the FBI is really on the case. This is how hot the heat was for Kate at this time and why she's such a revered criminal. But we find out the actual reason that Kate is trying to talk to her mom, and she wants to know why her mother betrayed her. And I think that this is really a big explanation for how Kate is towards other people that she gets close to. She has been betrayed by everybody who's supposed to love her. Her father isn't her real father. Sam Austin was never her real father, and he could never have custody of her. So he lied to her by never telling her who her real father was. Also, she feels betrayed because she thought he would have killed him because he knew how bad of a person Wayne was. So she feels betrayed twice by her father, and now her mother goes out of her way to betray her as well. And so she never feels like she can get close to anybody, because if your parents betray you, then who can you trust? The closest person that she ever had, and she never felt that sort of, betrayal from, was the person that she killed, her friend Tom. So, really interesting thing that we just learned about Kate's personality. This takes us into the jungle, where Kate and Juliet start to get into a little tiff over her not returning to Jack. Kate not returning to Jack. He had told her not to come back, and I don't think that Kate had realized until even now that she wasn't right in coming back. He didn't want her to come back, not because he was saving face or trying to save her. He was telling her not to return. And now Kate is actually facing some of the consequences for her decision. And what does she do? Lashes out like a child, and in the process ends up dislocating Juliet's arm. Really, really love that we just keep seeing it beaten into us this entire episode, how Kate is. But we hear the little ticking, and the smoke monster shows up and flashes lights at Juliet and then disappears into the night. Now let's return to the beach, where Hurley is coaching Sawyer on what to do with Claire. He tells him that you should just go up there, give her a compliment about the baby, and give her some blankets. She's the key to everybody. So he does, but he does it in a very awkward way, and really, ultimately, it ends up just kind of being cute. You can see Claire totally appreciates it, and that he feels better about himself, even in just doing that. So, really cute exchange. I love that there's this warmth in the midst of all the stuff that's going on in this episode with Kate and Juliet and her backstory and everything. So let's get back to him in the jungle, where Kate finds out that Jack didn't want her to come back from Juliet. She tells Kate why, and it's because Jack had broken her heart. They had cameras set up, and he saw what she had done, and that broke his heart, so he wanted to leave the island. We now return to our flashback, where Kate finally confronts her mother about what she did. And her mom tells Kate that what she did was selfish. And she tells her that you can't choose who you love, and you blew up the man that I love in cold blood. If I ever see you again, I'm going to yell for help. And the next time we had seen her, which was in season 1 or 2, she yelled for help in the hospital. Really interesting to see that close up. And then when we get into the jungle with Juliet, we see Kate getting put in check another time, because she says, Juliet, you don't even know Jack. And then Juliet knows everything about him. Absolutely everything. Great little scene between Juliet and Kate here. I love their dynamic. We now return to the beach, where Hurley shows Sawyer how he can make people happy by just trying to be part of the community. That was the whole point of what he was doing. There was never going to be a vote. They were never going to banish him. He just wanted to show Sawyer that he could make people happy because he's their temporary leader. He is kind of in control and has been guiding everyone. When Nikki and Paolo were going through getting buried alive, they all turned to Sawyer. And just like Jack, he didn't want to have this position. But the people are turning to him because he knows answers and he's willing to put himself on the line and make those hard decisions. We get a nice little montage on the beach where everybody's happy with the baby and they're all sharing food. And I really like that they toss this in to Lost and they show us these people on the beach living together and not dying alone, like said so often in the show. We return to Kate and Juliet, who finally return to the barracks, and Kate apologizes for what she did by bringing Locke to the other side of the island and having him blow up the submarine and screwing Jack's chance of getting off the island. we return to the flashback where Kate finds out that Cassidy is pregnant, and we know that that is Sawyer's kid, and that she doesn't want to call the cops because she still loves him, just like her mother, and you can't choose who you love. And we close out the episode at the barracks where they have a little bit of a tiff over bringing Juliet along, but Jack vouches for her and they all leave under contention. Which leads us right into One of Us, where Kate, Jack, Saeed, and Juliet are setting up camp for the night. Saeed wants to know all about Juliet and the others, and that takes us into a flashback where Juliet is getting dropped off by her sister at the very, very secure facility for the Middleos Bio Foundation, where again we see Richard and Ethan helping Juliet get situated. In the jungle, we see Jack putting Juliet under his protection and telling Saeed that he will not get any answers out of her until she's ready. And this really upsets Saeed. You can see him really mad even in the next scene later on. Just love that little quirk that they put that into Saeed. We now go to the beach where we see Claire, who seems to not feel very well and is kind of tired. Something seems a little bit more off. She falls asleep pretty quickly after Charlie takes Aaron and goes on their walk. We now return to the flashback where Alpert really hard sells Juliet on what this job is and really kind of breaks what her expectations were for what she does, and she quickly drinks her knockout juice, and the next time she wakes up, she's already on the island. And I want to point this out. This is how an other got to the island. We have never seen anything like this before. We've seen everybody on 815. We've always known that the others are there, but now we see how Juliet actually got on the island. That's really cool. It was really fun to see that. When we return to the beach, Jack and everybody is returning, and I noticed something here. Sawyer actually never had to be the leader of the group. He got like one night, and then he's just off the hook here. He's really happy to see Kate, but he's not very happy to see Juliet, and everybody starts to freak out. So they all go and they have their little meeting, and Hurley is the first person who actually talks to her, and they bring up what happened to Ethan and where he lies now, and he's just kind of there to watch her. But it's interesting, I think, very interesting, that it's Hurley that they sent over, probably the most neutral person who can gauge people pretty well. But he's actually playing it pretty rough, telling her where Ethan lies. I don't know if he's trying to be nice to her or not, but it's really interesting. This takes us into our flashback where Juliet is losing a patient here on the island, and we see both Ethan and Goodwin are in this scene. Ethan really was their surgeon. We see her trying to save this woman's life, and he's not able to. But what we find out from this scene is that women who come to the island and get pregnant on the island always have complications. So she wants to leave. She wants to try her research off the island. Otherwise, there's no other way that they could know if that is truly the case. They have to test the theory. But Ben gets her to stay because he tells her that her sister's cancer has come back, but Jacob will take care of it personally if she stays. And in this scene, he mentions that absolutely no one on this island can get cancer. And we know that because when Rose came to the island, all of her cancer disappeared. So we know that this place can't harbor cancer. But I find that interesting because he definitely gets it later, and that's the catalyst for everything here. On the beach, they continue to argue about what to do with Juliet. They just don't trust her, but Claire's situation is worsening. However, Juliet knows what's wrong with her because she did it. And she explains, though, a lot of gaps that we didn't see for Ethan, and that what Ethan was doing was not part of any of their plan, and that what he did was entirely on his own. Really interesting scene here. She's offering to help, and Jack is vouching for her. This takes us back to the flashback where Juliet is actually in a relationship with Goodwin, and it seems to be the only thing that she's got on this island that she likes. But she gets a knock on the door and finds out that there's something very urgent to tell Ben. She runs over there, and I love when he answers the door, he's reading Carrie. This ties back into all of the comments that I've been making about him pointing out that there was no Stephen King in the hatch for him to read. But she calls him out for being a liar. She tells him that you lied to me, you have cancer, and you told me that's impossible on the island. She knocks a glass out of her hand. She's pretty badass in this scene. Really love it. But she tells him you have cancer and once again requests to go home, but is denied. This takes us back to the jungle, where Sawyer and Saeed catch up to Juliet, who's getting the medical supplies to help Claire, and they're playing cops with her, but Juliet quickly points out the irony of their situation, given that Saeed used to be a torturer and Sawyer used to con people. This takes us to our flashback, where we have a really nice little montage where we hear that same song, Downtown, being played, but starts to get haunting towards the end as the plane crashes. And it's really cool, this whole part here, and what I love about this whole episode is it's showing us everything from Flight 815 in the perspective of the others, and in the perspective specifically of Juliet. But if you really think about this season so far, we've really learned a lot of things about the others. We've learned where they live, what they do, how much influence they actually have, and knowledge of the island. We've really gotten a lot of insight into them, and I love that this season really gives us that explanation, because people would constantly complain that the show was doing whatever it wanted, but definitely if you go back, especially after you've watched the whole series and watched this season, it explains so much about the others. So Ben takes Juliet to the Flame, and we do know that they actually can communicate with the outside world from that station, and then we see how they were able to get all the information on everybody on the island who crashed, and just how much data these guys can actually collect. And Juliet is able to see that her sister and her nephew are alive and well, and they are both happy, and it's a great little scene that we see here. But Ben tells her that her work is not done here, and that is why she still can't leave. We return to the beach, where Charlie has a hard time putting his faith in an other to help Claire. You can see how much care Charlie has for her, but he can't reconcile that these others have tried to kill him, and now they're offering to help Claire. He has a hard time believing that that's the case, but he can believe Jack. And so Jack vouches for him, and his trust wins over Charlie, and she seems to actually solve the problem for Claire. Claire is 100% okay after she's given that serum, and we get a really nice moment with Jack and Juliet, who have a heart-to-heart. And he tells her that you're one of us because you want to get off this island just as much as any of us. And so that's why you're part of our group. And that's why you'll eventually be accepted into this camp. And it's a great little scene, which is then absolutely and totally destroyed by the next. We see Ben going over this whole plan, point for point, with Juliet. And we realize that it's all been planned out. Claire's problem was meant to earn their trust. She solves their problem, and this helps them feel like she can be part of the group. Damn. These others are really nuts. They know a lot. They are very manipulative under Ben. It's a really interesting dynamic that we've seen here. Guys, thank you so much for sticking with me this week and every week here at We Go Back. Email any questions, thoughts, theories, you know the drill, to wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. Follow me at KingLordBryan on Twitter. Next week, we will be reviewing Catch-22 and DOC. Catch-22 is a book name. I will probably talk about it then. I don't know why I'm talking about it now. See you next week.